Well, I'm pretty shocked, actually, because whatever happened to the aeroplane, which meant that the pilot couldn't get the flaps and gear down for the landing, was not actually what caused the death of the passengers. The passengers were killed by hitting a solid structure just over the end of the runway, where a solid structure should not be. That solid structure contained the instrument landing system antennae, which does need to be there because it guides in bad weather. And of course, this was very good weather. In bad weather, that antenna guides the aircraft to the runway, when the pilot can't see it until the last second. Those antennae are normally just stuck in the ground and they're collapsible, so that if you go over the end of the runway, the antennae collapse and don't cause the aircraft any damage. But we can see the aircraft running into this structure and just crumpling and exploding. I don't know what standards they think were appropriate, but other people, when they put a structure for the instrument landing system antennae, don't put them in a concrete structure. What we saw was, during the video of this landing, was we saw the aircraft being put down beautifully with wings perfectly level. It was sliding on its belly. It was going very fast because the pilot couldn't get the flaps down, possibly because the hydraulics had failed after a bird strike. But anyway, he had to land particularly fast. That's why the aircraft went over the end of the runway. That's why, because aircraft occasionally will go over the end, you don't put solid structures immediately in the overrun. But that's what happened here. It was a very good one. And if you watch it minutely all the way down the runway, when the aircraft, just before it hits that wall, there is no extant damage to the aircraft. There's a bit of smoke coming off from the friction with the runway. Lots and lots of belly landings or gear up landings take place around the world from time to time. Aeroplanes can survive this. The crash crews on the airfield are ready for it. So, this did not. The runway, the Transport Minister is quite right. The runway didn't cause this accident. Something happened to the aeroplane. It disabled it. I think it lost hydraulics. They couldn't get the gear down. Overran the runway. It's the wall at the end, right at the end of the runway. If that hadn't been there, everybody would be alive now. Whatever happened, whether it was a bird strike or something, but one of the engines also appears to have been severely damaged, might have had to be shut down. But the crew managed to fly the aircraft on one engine. It's designed to be able to be flown on one engine. But whatever went wrong, the pilot decided to abandon the first attempt to land. And having done that, he then went to having taken off at the far end, he then turned round, came back, landed on the same runway from the opposite direction. But that landing that we've seen on video, no damage came to the airplane during the run. That's the bit that we really want to have clarified. And the cockpit voice recorder, the conversation between the pilots, the pilot knew he had a real problem and he didn't have much of the time to deal with it. That's why he put out a mayday call. So the landing itself, though, that was essential, and he did his best to make it safe. But then the wall was there to get him. Well, I mean, if everything that I've just said was completely right, then they're going to be asking, what on earth was an obstruction like that doing, literally within less than 200 metres of the end of the runway? I mean, that is a place where you shouldn't have obstructions. And even, as I said, if you put aerials in there for the instrument landing system, the aerials are collapsible so that if you do get an overrun, you go straight through the aerials without causing damage to the airplane. So why was there an obstruction there? If you watch the footage again, you'll see not only at the time of impact did the aircraft completely crumple, but also where the aircraft wreckage ends up, it had been brought to a complete halt from about 70 miles an hour in a few metres. Well, the thing is that Boeing has had a lot of controversy with the 737 MAX series. This is not a MAX. This was slightly earlier than the MAX, and in the meantime, I can say quite categorically, the MAX, the problem which caused all the issues, have been fixed. So the fact that this was a Boeing 737 has got really very little to do, or nothing to do, with this accident. If the same thing had happened to an Airbus, I suspect the result would have been the same if the pilots had handled it in the same way. I don't think it's to do with it's not to do with the runway, as the Transport Minister said. The runway would normally be long enough. It's not to do with the fact that it was a Boeing or an Airbus. It's to do with the fact that something went wrong. You can't make rules about what birds should do. Bird strikes are possibilities. But this aircraft, this runway shouldn't have had an obstruction like that in the runway overrun.